All right, so I'll do a little bit of housekeeping here. So this is a webinar. This is a fireside chat between Heather Hershey, who's the research director at IDC. I'll let her introduce herself more formally in a minute here, and myself, a dude who works in software at a B2B e-commerce platform company called OroCommerce. We're going to spend an hour together. There will be a presentation from Heather. Then there will be a chat between me and Heather, and we are definitely not robots. And then there will be time for Q&A. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom client in the window that you are on, you will see a little button called Q&A. There's a kind of a speech bubble with a question mark in it. If you click that button, you will have the opportunity to put in questions. We will get to the questions once all of the chit chat has concluded. We will get through as many as we possibly can, and our contact information will be made available to everyone so that if you want to follow up the conversation with more of an in-person with either Heather or myself, you will have the ability to do so. But it is, I see that it is 9:03 a.m. my time. I'm in beautiful Missouri. And where are you coming from, Heather?
Canton, Ohio, home of the NFL Hall of Fame.
All right, look at us. Midwest is best. The weather is beautiful right now. It is not raining. It is sunny. It is almost fall-like. We'll go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm Aaron Sheehan. I got to think about my title every time I say it. I am the Director of Product Marketing at OroCommerce, a B2B digital commerce platform company. And Heather, why don't you introduce yourself and kick us off with your slides?
Sure. My name is Heather Hershey, as Aaron said, and I am the Research Director of Worldwide Digital Commerce Strategy. Prior to that, I just covered digital commerce. So now it's a little bit of software and services and the strategic deployment of the software. And at IDC, that is an incredibly horizontal area of coverage. So I'm not only just covering the digital commerce platforms themselves, but also the things that go into the ecosystems for staging environments for commercial transactions. So that could be B2B, B2C, it could be OMS systems, order management systems, product information management systems, product experience management systems, configure price quote systems. So I could rattle off a whole laundry list, but I cover everything but the kitchen sink for commerce. And without further ado, I'd like to show you a little bit about what that looks like. This, what you're probably seeing right now, is a map of my market to give you just an idea of how horizontal that is. I won't go through here with, yeah, exactly. I won't go through all of this, but it's on IDC.com if you're interested. So, you know, shout out to IDC. If you're interested, just reach out and we'd be happy to walk you through it. But I wanted to kind of give that preface to give you an indication of what exactly is going on in the global digital commerce software market and what we mean by that. So now that you've seen a little glimpse of that market, this is a little bit more of a snapshot of what's going on with the core commerce products. So this excludes the PIMs and all the secondary and tertiary systems that will plug into a commerce product. So in this case, this is going to be the main core commerce engines, as well as some of those payment mechanisms, maybe some merchant of record and some vendors of that nature. But the overall gist is that the digital commerce software market continued to grow globally by 14.3% in 2023. And by the way, this data is very fresh. This report literally published Monday. So this is about as new as it gets for us. Even though this is retrospective, it's a new report. So compared with 2022, I mean, we've seen steady growth. And even if we take that all the way back through 2021, you can see that even though some of the growth has slowed down post-pandemic, it's still a growing market. And, you know, there's a lot of nuance to this that, you know, we could always unpack if you're interested later on, or if you ask a question in the chat, I'd be happy to do a little bit of a deeper dive. But I just want to show you the gist that this is a growing and thriving market. And frankly, a lot of that is happening in B2B digital commerce. And then I also wanted to show you something that I thought was a little bit curious, because what we've been seeing for the past several years is steady growth of this market. Now, this is, again, both B2B and B2C and everything in between packed into these numbers here. And so we've seen, you know, kind of slow and steady growth of the on-prem side, but really robust growth going on the SaaS side of digital commerce software. And previously, the on-prem side had been growing at about, you know, a steady 2.3, 2.5% cycle over cycle. This is different. This is different. For 2023, the growth rate, which mind you, this is a smaller section of the market. So obviously that's going to skew some of the statistical relevance of the actual percentage of growth. So just kind of bear that in mind. But the interesting thing to my mind is that it jumped from 2.3% to over 14% for on-premises deployments in 2020.
You mean on-premise deployments are growing faster than cloud deployments?
Yes, but they're both growing at about 14-ish%, which is crazy sauce, right? It's just slightly more robust over there on the on-prem side. Now, this is something that for me as an analyst prompts further investigation, because we don't know what's causing this. All I can do is really speculate with the data that I have on hand right now, but that's a juicy opportunity to dive in a little deeper in subsequent rounds of research. But my suspicion is that this is coming from B2B, because by and large, B2B organizations are a little bit more likely to want on-premises solutions. You know, we see that in the OMS market, which I also model on behalf of IDC. The majority of those deployments are already on-prem. It's like almost an 80-20 split. And so here we can kind of use that information to guess that that's probably the momentum driving the on-prem deployments here.
That's fantastic. For the audience, if you have a theory, a pet theory as to why on-premise deployments would be growing faster than public cloud deployments, throw it in the chat or Q&A. We'd love to hear some speculation from folks here, because I suspect that we have some people on this call who are maybe part of the buying process and might have some insight into why that might be the case. But go ahead. Sorry, continue.
No, and I also wanted to point out, just in case anybody's looking at this and going, but it looks like the number of on-premises deployments shrank. Again, that's the relativity of the actual statistical data, because again, the public cloud was already a much larger chunk of the market. So it growing by 14%-ish, like literally eclipsed that growth narrative on the on-prem side still. But I still find that that's an interesting call out from the data. So that gets me to some of the core of why some of these digital transformations may be happening in B2B. And frankly, a lot of it's being driven by the C-suite, and most notably the CEO. They want to modernize to be more competitive in the digital era. I think that COVID, we all are aware, that was a huge wake-up call, that ignoring digital channels for commerce was no longer an option, because you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. If your distribution side of things breaks down, if you can no longer meet in person, if people can't come to your showroom, if you have no mechanism to actually make sales, or worse, supply chain disruptions really get in the way, you need to diversify all of that on the back end, which is an incredibly complex endeavor. And it's very difficult to do all that supply chain massaging if your data is not right and your systems are clunky and archaic. And also think about the vulnerability for a moment. I just want to mention for a second that the instance of cyber attacks going on from, all over Kingdom Come are growing at an exponential rate. And, in fact, I am aware of at least one situation where a 3PL I'm aware of got cyber attacked with a ransomware attack at the beginning of last week. They shut down, and all of their AWS, or not AWS, their Amazon FBA sellers and independent merchants, all the retailers that were relying on that 3PL, they are now in a crisis. They may not be able to get access to their inventory. It's going to be a huge debacle, all because of a single ransomware attack. So what I'm saying is the core of the problem there was that this particular 3PL had very archaic systems. They did not modernize. They didn't have someone at the helm that was actually paying attention to security. And in this new era of AI, you can't just look at the upside of the sales pitch. You also have to look at, what that's going to do to grow the increased likelihood of cyber attacks against your business. So modernizing your systems is critically important right now. You have to get on top of it right now. And I think that a lot of CEOs are recognizing that there is a very complex benefit that comes from modernizing your commerce stack on the fulfillment end and on the front end. It's that it helps you with this cyber attack issue, but it also will help you modernize and move more quickly, so that if you have to pivot, you can do so basically on the fly and as needed. But you can see here that CEOs are saying that they are working for organizations. So 56% say they were working for organizations where their digital transformation, that's what DX stands for, efforts go beyond the current financial year. So it's a long-term process. They're aware of it by and large. However, 44% of those same CEOs say that their organizations are struggling to keep up with it. They're struggling to keep those initiatives on track. And so scope creep starts to take hold, and then things just kind of get pushed off into the future. And that is exactly what you don't want to do in these
That's
situations for the reasons I just outlined.
Yeah, exactly right. I had a conversation with a very large distributor a couple of weeks ago who was in the middle of, they showed me their plan. They have a 6-year digital transformation plan, and a very complicated stack. And they're already doing digital, but they're doing digital in a very, like, there are probably, I think, about 20 different systems sort of scattered all over their landscape. And the change management involved in that digital transformation to make them all work together, to make deployments less painful, to make delivery and adoption less painful to their organization, to break down the silos, right? Inside there, that is a 6-year plan. That is ambitious. It's very ambitious. I totally see what you're saying.
Yes, I know. You got to imagine that, this problem just gets blown up to gorilla, size when we're talking about multinational corporations that acquire individual brands that often come to the table with their own stacks, their own supply, their own inventory management, all those other things, and then trying to integrate all those things and make sure that they're all secure. They're both totally different problems and very top of mind and very urgent. And so I think this is also part of what's driving a lot of what's currently going on in the market to consolidate and unify a lot of these systems, because it's just really complicated to keep track of all of it. And especially, the larger the organization and the more complex the organizational structure of that particular business. So there are some data points about the top factors driving the adoption of digital platforms. And I think that it's unsurprising that by and large, improving customer engagement and experiences is still very top of mind. I've heard some software vendors say that retention is the new growth. I disagree with that fundamentally. Maybe that's just because I'm too close to commerce and I love it, but I think you can't have one without the other. Yeah. And so retention is very important. Making sure your customers are happy, always important. But in B2B, you can kind of take it as a given that, yes, you have a lot of individual stakeholders that will have a say in purchasing decisions, particularly the higher the volume. But at the same time, they're going to be a little stickier, particularly if you work to build up that relationship over time. They're not going to be quite as capricious as individual end consumers are when, they're shopping around for, makeup or something like that. So I think that the customer experience is definitely important for both sides of the house, but it's probably a little bit more urgent of a need on the B2C side of digital commerce. But don't fall asleep on it if you're B2B, because it's still very important and it will become a competitive differentiator for you and your business if you stage a really nice, delightful environment for your B2B buyers. Increasing business agility, obviously, like operational agility is key, and will continue to be key. So I think investing in that's pretty much a safe bet. Preparation of new technical capabilities. You could see that these are all really high priorities. And this, by the way, is not the whole list of things that we offered as potential answers. These were just the top choices that I truncated, so that way this slide wouldn't become completely overwhelming. But just kind of run down, you can see enhancing security, also incredibly important. Automating AI, so important right now. And again, particularly on the operational side. It's stunning how much of digital commerce, particularly in B2B, is still done on paper, which can lead to really convoluted, complex, redundant issues, errors, just a lot of errors, because the more manual steps that you add to a process, the more you get the instance of human error. And people don't have to be necessarily particularly careless. It's just a fact of life to err as human. Solving productivity problems. Again, digitizing things can help with that. Automating can help with that. Yeah, I think all of these are really, really important, and the data bears that out. And then to drill down a little bit more into marketing, because let's face it, marketing right now in digital spaces is very painful, for lack of better words.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, discovery is broken. The platforms are I don't think I can say the word, but you've probably seen thought leadership giving a really colorful word to what's going on with the platforms where you'd be advertising for this stuff. And so the data reflects that pain point too. And again, this is independent of whether it's B2B or B2C. This particular survey, we were asking both kinds of business entities this question, but we were focusing mainly on people who work in marketing roles. And we asked, which of the following statements best describes your top pain point? And the number one pain point with a bullet was a quarter of the respondents said we are pulled in so many different directions, mediating between customers, prospects, sales, development, and the executives. Marketers can't make anyone happy right now. And I think the sort of Damocles is always hanging over their heads that, in the current era, they might be let go because they can't magically make growth happen. They're being asked to do the impossible. Here's no budget. Now go make money with it. It's like alchemy, but in the digital world.
I'll be quoting you to our CEO later as someone who is in the marketing organization here. That's good. Thank you.
Yes.
And I'll also Venmo you $20.
Yay! I like money. Okay. Anyway, 16% said we have a one-size-fits-all marketing approach with very little personalization. I'm just gonna say boo to that all day. And one of the highly ironic things is that I work obviously as an analyst, and so vendors send me their marketing material all the time to try to get me to talk about their products. And what's really fascinating and very ironic to me is that they could be talking about a personalization product and the email won't be personalized. Like, that's the bare minimum. That's the bare minimum, is just putting my first name in the, that's not even that technology has existed for well over a decade. That is not that fancy. And so it never fails to amaze me, how, it's hard to practice what you preach sometimes, but that personalization does matter. It matters a lot, because one of the things that you will find is that, it's a lot harder to make a customer, particularly, an end consumer, feel loyalty towards you. They have no obligation to be loyal to you. You could put Disneyland into the interface of your website, and they may shoplift the experience and then go bounce and buy from a competitor that's selling something for $2 less. So the personalization does help because it makes the customers feel like you are invested in them somehow, that you understand their pain points without them having to painstakingly explain them to you. And that is incredibly compelling. And it's still very differentiating.
It's trust.
Yeah,
it builds trust.
Absolutely.
We all of us here in the B2B industry understand that buyers are buying from us because they trust us. Whatever it is that we're selling, they have to trust that we're delivering something that is quality and that it will get to them on time. Price they can go figure out for themselves, but people will not go price shopping if they trust you, right? And that's where personalization helps a lot, because it demonstrates that you as the supplier know who the buyer is and what they want from you. And they're not starting over from scratch every time they pick up the phone or log into their website and having to re-explain what they want and what they need and how they need it. Yeah, totally agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And I just wanted to also kind of dispel a myth that I've heard out in the ether of the internet, that no one is jumping to a new commerce platform. That is not true. I did a little bit of survey work, as you can see here. And typically, according to my research, buyers re-platform their digital commerce system in roughly 5 to 7 year cycles. And that's because they're looking for Cinderella's glass slipper. They want something that is going to give them all the features they need for business, but without a bunch of crap baked into it that, inflates the price and isn't practical. Because that's something that you hit up against a lot in some of the more B2C oriented digital commerce products that are then, padded with a bunch of superficially relevant B2B sort of features, is that they give you a bunch of stuff you don't actually need or want for your B2B business. And so I think that there's a little bit more of an opportunity if you focus on finding products in B2B commerce that are focused specifically on that kind of business, because they will often give you the option to add things like direct to consumer portals and things like that without you having to customize every single thing just to make that possible. I also wanted to show you that better digital maturity allows for broader use of cutting-edge business optimization technology. So 98% of worldwide CEOs consider AI a priority for their organizations. And so the thing is, we all know, unless you've been under a rock since November of 2022, you should be aware by now that, ChatGPT exists and, Claude from Anthropic exists and all these other things. And they're being added to a lot of the software all throughout business. And sometimes that is a desirable thing, sometimes it is not. That's neither here nor there. But I think that one of the more important aspects of this is that what a lot of CEOs want to see is efficiency. And they want to be able to play around with this technology and they want to give these tools to their teams. But if the data isn't right, you can't leverage it well. You won't be able to get these particular new features stood up properly. It will require you to do a digital transformation in tandem with bringing on the AI, which is a painful truth that a lot of CEOs may not realize up front. They may go, oh, I want the flashy new thing, make that happen because money happens when I do that. Cool, right? And that may be true, but you'll still need to see a proof of concept and you'll still need to make sure that your data is good, because obviously garbage in, garbage out is a really relevant point. And we should have all heard this at multiple stages of this AI journey. But what is really painful for me to look at is the data on this slide, because the results of the Gen AI rollouts by and large to date have been mixed based on IDC survey work. So our first survey, which is the Future Enterprise Resiliency and Spending Survey, we found, after we surveyed 288 various professionals in IT roles, we asked them how are these projects going, and the answer is only 14% said that they were successful with standing this up after proof of concept. 41% said that they lacked the developers with the required skills and tools. Now, I want to put a big asterisk there, because if you're asking from your IT team to do the impossible, to basically, leapfrog a digital transformation process just to get the AI features online, it's not going to work. And so that may be part of why that stat is so high. It may be because the respondent, because we're not sitting there holding their hand and contextualizing things while they take these surveys. So it may be possible that some of those respondents were mistaking, the bigger issue at hand, and that's that their data is probably not ready for this. 38% said the excessive cost prevented meeting ROI objectives. Again, if you need to do a full-scale digital transformation in order to use the AI features, yeah, that's definitely going to inflate the cost. That is an understatement. Add a 0 or 2 to the end of your budget. 36% said inadequate infrastructure or performance availability. So, now we're getting a little bit more to the core of the issue. 35% said poor coordination between IT and lines of business teams. I would suspect that's because the line of business wants it now. Why is this taking so long? And the IT team's like, but impossible. I think we're all familiar with that tension. And then 35% said tech services partners didn't meet project specifications. So there may have been some hiccups along the way. I think part of the issues, honestly, throughout all of these little slices of the data, the underlying theme is that the lack of digital maturity may be impeding some of the success of these projects. Now, there are ways where you can be very strategic in how you leverage technology and technology partners to be able to do this in stages without having to do it all at once. Because, obviously, you would probably want to avoid a full-scale rip and replace, or frankly, having to go through all of your data and trying to modernize all of it at the exact same time. So my 4 recommendations for the future of B2B digital commerce are as follows. 1, invest in the technology of the future today. For example, digital commerce platforms with robust feature sets, flexible data models, and APIs that can integrate with nearly any enterprise application. Because then what you can do is you can basically deploy things like the Strangler pattern, which, if you're not familiar with that terminology, it's named after the Strangler fig tree, which is kind of like a parasitic tree. It's actually kind of cool if you look it up. But what happens is that this tree kind of sets up shop next to a bigger tree. It kind of gets embedded in its root system, grows up alongside it till it kills the host tree and then takes over its spot. And so it's kind of a nice metaphor for the incremental decoupling of old, monolithic, insecure systems to adopt more modern ones as you prioritize them. Next, think of AI as a means to deliver human-centric experiences at scale. This may seem counterintuitive because you may want to. Okay, so the one thing I want to advocate against is turning your phone systems into a Gen AI powered IVR, right? Like, don't just make it so rigidly logic bound that it defeats the entire purpose of using Gen AI for the exercise, right? Like, you're supposed to make it a little bit more human and compassionate and empathetic. And if you were joining us at the top of this particular webinar, you probably heard us riffing a little bit about, the paralinguistic tics and whatnot that are being embedded into the voice of ChatGPT, because it makes it seem more human and relatable. That's great, but you should take it seriously when technology firms tell you that this should focus your human talent on human things that are not repetitive, which is very radical if you think about it, because for the last 30, 40, 50 years, we've been basically forcing people to act like expert systems with very strict logic about what they can and cannot do. And those constraints make those jobs ripe for automation. And
I would
so
say I would say this way: the constraints are the data that goes to train the model, right? So if I have a robust set of rules for how my call center interacts, how my reps interact, how various humans in my business, they're operating from scripts. If someone has written the script, that means that an AI, an LLM can actually replace it. It's the stuff that's not scripted. And I want to talk about that after the slide a little bit with you about how to deal with the stuff that isn't already known and scripted. But yes, I totally agree with this point.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to discuss that further. And then finally, last 2 points: continuously assess and refine systems, processes, organizational structure, and workflows. CI/CD, I think you need to consider that this is not a crock pot. You can't set it and forget it, right? Not in this new iteration of the AI world and the digital era. You have to constantly make sure that your systems are secure and that they are working in a way that is optimal for business. So that way, if, heaven forbid, another catastrophic event like COVID ever happens, you're not left with your pants down. You can pivot and move and be flexible. And then prioritize data security. I keep mentioning that over and over again, but it's incredibly important. I cannot overstate it. You need to be aware that the era of AI is going to make it easier to do bad things to businesses and to target them specifically. So make sure that your systems are secure at every stage of digital transformation and as you do your digital commerce modernization. Prepare and protect your company from a future in which AI proliferation will open new opportunities for fraud and, frankly, reputational damage, because things like a ransomware attack can have a profound ripple effect for not only a B2B organization, but literally all of your distributors, all any retailers in that ecosystem. I mean, it could be catastrophic potentially. It's better to avoid it. An ounce prevention is worth 20 pounds of cure in this case. And that's it. So this is where you can find me if you want to follow up, or I saw some comments coming through in the chat about different data slices. Unfortunately, you would have to book a call with me and we could go through that with a slightly deeper dive. The data in the deck is what I've got on hand at the moment.
All right, so this concludes the first part, and now we get to the juicy second part, which is the fireside chat, because I have a lot of questions from your presentation that sort of like are raised to me, and I bet some of our attendees might have some questions as well. But I kind of want to start with something that you referenced on your last slide. You referenced Conway's Law. you and I have talked many times. This could be a drinking game. Every time for me that I bring up Conway's Law, I can do a shot from one of the many brown liquors behind me on the shelf. So Conway's Law is the theory that organizations build systems that copy their org chart or their org structure. And this 100% applies to IT. If you've been in the IT business for a long time, you've 100% seen, I think I referenced a large enterprise distributor earlier in the call who had this big 6-year digital transformation project, and their stack was a lot of boxes that aligned to, if you took it and overlaid it on the org chart, you would see an awful lot of mapping. And now they're trying to unwind that a little bit, because the org chart they had 20 years ago when they procured the technology is not the org chart that they have today. And there's a lot of need to share data and share processes from one side of the business to another. There's been merger and acquisition since that technology was initiated. So knowing that Conway's Law basically says that data and systems get built as a copy, as a mirror image of the org chart, if digital maturity is a function of having an organization that can use that data effectively, whether I'm trying to implement AI or I'm trying to get better reports about like what's working in my business and what's not, at the sales level down to the inventory forecasting and the finance level, what are some good organizational designs that facilitate that digital maturity? So in other words, IT is typically very separate. It's a whole box. It's a box. And then there's the business, and there's parts of the business, and they're in boxes. What I've seen from e-commerce is that e-commerce is this awkward sort of like layer that gets like fit into one of those boxes, and then it just gets absorbed. It gets absorbed by them. We don't want that. We want data and digital transformation driven through e-commerce to add value to everybody at the organization. And I'm kind of curious, you talk to a lot of companies of various sizes, but mostly big ones. Have you seen any good or promising trends in how people are thinking about getting this digital transformation to happen through their org chart?
Yeah, I actually have about 5 different models that sort of spring to mind. But one of the things that's interesting about Conway's Law, I view it almost like a cautionary tale. It's not necessarily a prophetic thing, but it's a law for a reason. It's basically stating, like you said, that if your organizational structure, your comm structure internally gets big and bloated over time, you're going to end up with really big and bloated tech stacks, matching complexity with complexity. And, that's what I would like to advocate for are things like, for example, the inverse Conway maneuver, which, sounds really convoluted, but it basically just states, you use this intentionally to your advantage. Know that these two things have a relationship with each other, as in the organizational structure and the IT structure. They have that kind of relationship where they mirror each other. And by knowing that, you can leverage that to your advantage. So for example, if you know that you want to have cross-functional teams that own products and use shared data to drive decisions, perhaps the thing you would want to do is have something like, a microservices-based system in mind for that. And then, try to organize your team into a product-oriented team, so squads and pods, to fit that system. So before you adopt the technology, reorganize your teams and then get into that technology. If you have data platforms for enterprise analytics systems that can ensure consistent data governance and integration across multiple business functions, or that's what you are driving towards, and that is the kind of systems architecture you want, then you will want a data-driven center of excellence model where there's a central team that ensures data governance while departments leverage standardized data practices. Perhaps you have cross-functional project management tools, ERP systems like that. You want to keep those. But you require both vertical functional and horizontal project data flow and collaboration between all those different stakeholders on all those different teams. Then maybe a matrix structure is the way to go. So that is when teams report to both functional and project leaders, promoting data sharing across projects and departments. Let's say that you want to have agility at scale, and you want to deploy agile at scale. So small cross-functional teams iterate quickly using data to inform decisions, because you want to bring on more DevOps platforms and cloud native applications that enable rapid deployment, development, and continuous improvement. And then the last example was, what if you just want to flatten everything, keep it simple? Fewer levels of hierarchy, improve data accessibility and communication because you have a much smaller organization overall with fewer layers of middle management and cross-department collaboration. So this is an effective use of collaboration tools and systems where open communication and real-time data access drive that kind of proactive decision making. So again, really great use case for good analytics and excellent interoperability between those systems.
That makes sense. I personally, I hate being in matrixed organizations just as a line employee. It's super frustrating. I like the agile cross-functional teams, the center of excellence model that you described. I think I've mentioned it not on this call, but many times before, right? This was what sort of in our space, in the B2B space, is what Grainger got famous for back after the Zoro Tools acquisition, and when they were like becoming kings of that endless assortment in B2B distribution. They did it through an e-commerce center of excellence, and it spawned a million white papers and talk tracks and conference appearances and things like that. But there are some good lessons learned in the B2B space to think about e-commerce as a center of excellence, as its own sort of first party entity inside of your org chart that can drive a strategy and make requests and demands of the rest of the business instead of being grafted onto IT or marketing or sales or some other piece. So
I agree. And I actually love that model as well, because I think that it's really important to recognize that there are very few other, roles in-house outside of commerce that will be able to tie, the data coming in from the marketing and the sales efforts to what's actually going on the back side of things,
right.
and fulfillment. I mean, it ties everything together. So their view of the world makes that a ripe opportunity for a center of excellence model.
All right. Now it's your turn to ask me a question. You got to come up
Oh
with
yeah.
something.
Okay.
It's a fireside chat.
I know. So, okay. So what do you think is the current state of B2B digital adoption that you see at OroCommerce? What kind of conversations are you having over there? Because I'll talk a little bit about, AI features. Maybe I've talked about that a little bit before, in my presentation, but I mean, what are you doing at Oro with AI, for example?
Okay, so there's two questions in there. So the first is, what's the state of digital adoption? And I would say it's increasing. So I've been doing B2B digital commerce for a while, and it's been this thing that is almost about to happen, like for years and years and years, and it actually is happening for real now. There are a lot. It used to be that the majority of the people you would talk to, if I talked to someone that was, say, $1 billion electrical distributor or HVAC distributor in the Midwest, maybe a family-owned business or roll-up or a holdco. If I talked to somebody 5 years ago, it would 100% be people are faxing orders. All my orders are faxed in, or a phone call. My website is a brochure with a button that says, click to call for quote. And that would be as advanced as digital got. And then all the data underlying it would actually be in like Adobe InDesign, because they would mail paper catalogs out to everybody. So all of the structured data about the products that they sold was the version that is in the ERP, which is really stock, location, and price with not much description and no pictures. And then a really nice catalog where everything is stored in PDFs, right? And things like that. And the ability to get that data out quickly to show to a prospect, to show to a current customer, to talk to another vendor was very limited. You had to lug a paper catalog around with you, and it was always slightly out of date. And there was very little reporting about say assortment and revenue and things like that as tied to the category level or product level, right? Like that was like very, very basic stuff. That's changed. There's still plenty of those companies out there, but most people are on, I think, at least their first version of some kind of digital platform of some kind. Might be a PIM, might not be e-commerce, right? Like it might be a PIM, it might be a more modern ERP, but it's a start, right? There might be a CRM somewhere in the business where pipeline and customer account information is stored, where digital interactions with buyers are actually stored, and that makes it you don't have to go like down the hall to the next cubicle to talk to the last person who talked to that customer to figure out what were they complaining about? They're on the phone again. They said they talked to you. What was it? Like digitizing that makes it, a lot more effective. So I think it is improving is what we're seeing at Oro. The kinds of conversations we're having about that are very much AI is driving some of it. But honestly, operational efficiency is driving most of it. People are wanting to centralize. There's a lot of tech buying that's happened in the B2B space that has been, I'm going to go back to the Conway's Law and I'll have to do a shot, but like one particular department got a hold of the credit card to buy one software app to do one thing. And then 15 years later, there's a lot of these apps and platforms floating around. Each one has its own database. They don't interoperate with one another. And so you have to sort of swivel chair from log into one system, get part of the information, log into another system, get another part of the information. So digital adoption is there, but the effectiveness of it is not. And the effectiveness of that is what we are seeing here. That really connects to AI, actually. You said garbage in, garbage out earlier. So on 100%, right? The AI doesn't work if all my data is siloed off into a dozen different apps, right? I need to get a data structure that is consistent across them. If I want BI, screw AI. Do I want business intelligence? Do I want analytics? Like I have to have some kind of system of record that actually captures all of it, not just the inventory piece of it that's in my ERP or my OMS, right? I need the full thing. And so one of the things that we actually just announced, I don't know if you saw it, we just announced this week a closed beta for 2 new AI features that we are working actively with current customers on. Some of the folks on this call, I think, have actually seen part of it already. There's going to be a pretty cool demo video coming out later this week, I believe. Contact me if you're interested in seeing it. But here's the 2 things that we're trying to solve for. One is orders. So a lot of manual ordering still happening. What happens? Somebody faxes me a purchase order or emails me a purchase order, and someone has to pull that up in their email client, swivel chair over to the ERP, and 10 key that purchase order into the ERP by hand. And the error rate of that is pretty high often, can be, especially when the paper version of the order is the customer's interpretation of what their pricing structure is and what their payment terms are, and what the SKUs are. And sometimes that's not exactly right because something changed. And like now it's on a person to try to like interpret, like this is the vision of what they say they want. It looks differently in the ERP. How do I map them? So it's error prone. The other piece of that is the fact that it is slow and inefficient. Someone's job has to be, a person has to do this. And there's a little bit of judgment involved because it's not a one-to-one mapping. So what we've released, what we are testing now with some of our larger clients is what we're calling smart orders, which is we've built a utility that you can take in a PDF copy of a purchase order or order form, and we will use OCR and AI to digitize that document and turn it into an actual order inside of Oro, and also validate the data that's in the order against the rules that are there in our system, because the e-commerce system is the system of record for like price books and price lists and payment terms that are available to a specific company and shipping addresses and things like that, all the basic stuff, and prompt a user to actually correct the things that need to be corrected, approve and override. And it takes some of that judgment out, and it makes it a whole lot faster to move from an analog order to a fully digital qualified order that is 100% quality. So that is one piece of it. The other thing that we're releasing is a smart agent. We talked a little bit about the personalization and customer experience piece of this. This is effectively I can say this, I guess, it's a chatbot, right? But it's a chatbot that is trained on the actual data of that customer's account with their role and permission taken into account. So that means that when I am logged in, I get access to a chatbot that actually knows all my order history, where my current orders are, what my pricing is on specific products, what products would be related to something that I already bought. Did something change? And a buyer can simply interact with that in natural language and start a check on their account history. They can start a quote, start an order, inquire about the product catalog. And again, it's giving a personalized experience based on that person's data to them, not like a chat bot that you would get on like Nike.com or some kind of consumer site where you can probably get a recipe for blueberry muffins out of it if you say ignore all previous instructions. Like this is considerably more tuned for B2B use cases specifically. So this is our attempt at, when I said that digital adoption is all about efficiency, is what we're seeing. It's like we're that next stage of like getting ROI out of the tech. That's what we're building. And that's why we're building it, because that's where we see the actual need is in B2B. It's getting more ROI out of digital transformation, not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but being able to power AI models and get a faster experience and more efficient experience for the team. So that's my answer.
That sounds incredibly practical, which I think sounds awesome. I have not seen it, so in full disclosure to the audience, I can't say anything specific to these features, but just from a conceptual basis, I mean, I think that it's got another pretty significant advantage, at least strategically, and that's that change management and getting, you know, your staff to use some of these tools is a huge part of the process. And frankly, it's where a lot of these proof of concepts of standing these features up kind of fails on the organizational end. And I think that one of the things that really stands out to me as you explain this is that this will actually, you know, it's not there to replace the people who are in those roles. Like you would still need a human in the loop to do those processes. And thank goodness, because B2B organizations, I don't get the sense that right now they're interested in fully replacing all their sales teams with bots, because that
No, and this is
relationship.
such a misconception, right? It's
Yeah,
about, what are you tasking those people to do? Are you tasking them to do basic data entry? Or are you tasking them to actually grow revenue and make customers happier? And
that's it.
yeah,
That's it. And no one enjoys doing repetitive data entry all day, every day. I mean, there might be a couple people out there where they're like, this is my jam, but I think most people want to do something that's slightly more intellectually stimulating than that to feel fulfilled. And so I think that this would automate the parts that should probably have already been automated and digitize them, make sure everything's right at the same time, while, you know, also freeing up those people to do something that they might actually enjoy more. And perhaps that is interfacing with the customers. That's that relationship
yep.
development part of things. I mean, it could be any number of things, but there are better uses of human talent, I think.
So I'm curious, like, do you have any examples of how a company has taken advantage of a digital transformation post them doing it? So I've digitized my sales and ops. I was doing it this way before, and now I'm doing it that way. I know for the AI piece, the sort of success rate is pretty low. Digital transformation in general, though, has been going for a lot longer. I'm curious if you have any, like, what's a good example of like something that a company might see on the back end of digitizing their processes?
Yeah, I think, you know, I have to be pretty vague here because obviously when people talk to me about their businesses in a consulting fashion, you know, it's under NDA. But in general, you know, we see optimizing order processing and lead times. So, you know, if a company has processed orders manually, which we just mentioned, you know, through paper forms, it can often lead to very slow order fulfillment, which can be frustrating for the buyers, you know, and particularly if they're waiting for a quote and they're still planning their purchases, that can be a very painful process. And the longer the clock ticks down, the less patient they tend to be about that. And that is a disadvantage, particularly if you know, they want to purchase a lot and they want to have an ongoing negotiation about it. Errors, delays, they lack visibility into the bottlenecks and various workflows. Maybe those workflows are, you know, manual, or they are in archaic workflow engines with really rigid logic. And so by digitizing order processing and tracking those workflows, you can monitor them. You know, you can figure out where they're breaking down. In each step of that process in real time, you can identify the delays immediately. You can adjust resources accordingly, which is incredibly important on the fulfillment end. And this will reduce lead times and improve on-time delivery rates. I think having accurate demand forecasting and inventory management is often a goal for a lot of companies that go through a digital transformation process. And it's because they relied on very manual sales records, paper invoices that, again, may be riddled with errors and may not be capturing certain kinds of data that are also fundamentally crucial for forecasting processes. And this can, I mean, because what's the incentive of the sales team to capture some of that data manually? I mean, that's part of it too. So often leading to over ordering of raw materials, stock outs, because there's no complete comprehensive view of the demand trends underlying all that stuff. So if you digitize the sales data and you're capturing other kinds of data throughout that process because it's digitized, stuff that, a sales rep may not think to manually record, you can analyze that historical order pattern data, integrate market trends, and to forecast demand more accurately. And it can give you a more precise view of inventory to plan it, reduce excess stock, and minimize shortages. One place that I'm a big fan of is dynamic pricing. Now I know
Oh,
that yeah, that's kind of a risky click because there's a lot of strategy involved there. You really should not only rely on the system, but if you use dynamic pricing, you should honestly have someone on your team that is an expert with pricing logic themselves and can help work with those digital models. But if your prices are set manually and they're locked in cold storage in an ERP, you may be losing out on revenue opportunities. And opportunities to react to market changes, which can lead to radical overcorrections, like we saw with a lot of companies post-COVID, and the prices all shot up. So automated systems use sales data and market trends to dynamically adjust the pricing in real time. And it could be based on availability. It could be based on, basically anything. But the point is you get more flexibility on how you can adjust those prices and give certain buyers certain kinds of deals, et cetera, without there being a heavy reliance on human expertise to drive the process beyond just making sure that the models are right. And
well, you need
then,
to be able to react to like real world
yes,
events. Like there's a longshoreman strike going on right now, for instance. Like I bet that's
yes,
doing great things to the supply chain and inventory and stock on hand and what replenishment and forecasting looks like. If your processes and your systems are completely offline or not digitally accessible, making a change to react to something that's happening in the world, you're not going to be able to do it. And you're going to be, you may end up sacrificing margin because you could not be agile, which is something you said earlier. I think you want an agile organization. If you don't have that agility, then reacting becomes very hard to do. And then it becomes very expensive because you didn't react. So
yes. And speaking of agility, I mean, a smile came to my face because this brings to mind a topic that I think is probably near and dear to both of our hearts. What do you think of composability and composable commerce?
oh
Because a
gosh.
lot of your competitors and systems integrators in the space have extremely strong opinions about this.
Okay, that's a fair statement. I like that, and I know you work with a lot of those other platforms. Here's what I think about composability. Like, honestly, I think it's a good thing. I think composability as an architectural principle is a solid idea. It's also not new. Services-oriented architecture is, I mean, I'm old enough to remember that. The idea that you isolate down functional units. You talked about this in the context of an organizational group as well, building those micro teams that are focused on very specific sort of functional outputs and putting them together, right? Same principle applies to software, where I think the tech narrative on LinkedIn and thought leadership has lost the thread a little bit, is that composability is an unalloyed good in and of itself, and that it creates value. So I will say this, there is no technological approach that creates business value by itself. It doesn't happen. It is not modernizing to an API only system does not give you better margins. In fact, it's often very CapEx intensive upfront and might have, at least initially, the opposite effect, like any big digital transformation would. Where I see the value being added is where composable principles, both on the technology side and in the org chart, enable the agility that we were talking about. So the ability to make a change quickly that is localized to a specific method, a specific application, a specific functional business unit like dynamic pricing, and have it reflected out across the org. I don't want to have to change one mega application. I don't want to have to push an SAP upgrade to my ERP and my eCommerce and my CRM and my OMS in order to make one change over here. And that is the monolith thing that so many of the composable vendors talk about. But the flip side is if you decompose too much, then you have change management problems out the wazoo because you have to go talk to a billion different people and none of the systems are talking to one another. So I think composability is good. It only works if there's interoperability between the units, and you actually have to make it connect to business value for it to be useful. So all props to, my buddies, the Mock Alliance. Obviously, I've been in the Mock Alliance before. This is really inside baseball, Heather. I love it, and I'm trying not to be petty. So it's good. It's good for me. It's good for my soul. But generally, there's good stuff there. There's good stuff there. But it is not. It is a little bit of a solution in search of a problem, when the real problems are change management inside the organization and adoption of digital technologies and standardization of data. Those are the real human problems and business problems that have to be solved before you can get to the point of patting yourself on the back that you've solved all of your problems because you've gone composable in your tech stack. We did have a question come through. Let's see. One challenge in B2B e-commerce is also related to last mile connectivity. Are there solutions for integrating with logistics companies to provide dynamic logistics pricing by locating pin code to pin code data, leading to precise pickup location and date? I'll take a first stab at this and say yes, actually. There are. So I've worked with several logistics companies. I'm less personally familiar with the pin code to pin code data, but dynamic fulfillment, dynamic shipping pricing, based on making queries to carrier APIs, all the way up to and including like LTL freight, less than truckload freight. I've actually seen this done at the full container level, although there aren't a ton of providers who digitize that. I'm sure Ryan Peterson at Flexport is like all in on fixing this problem, which is a separate conversation. But yes, these do exist. In the e-commerce space, there's companies like Desktop Shipper, companies like Shipper HQ that have been around for a really long time that do this on the parcel and LTL side. And they can also handle things like accessorials. So if you need liftgate, if you need curbside, if you need white glove, so there's extra, right? There's always things that modify that fulfillment price. That's what comes to my mind. I'm curious, Heather, in the 1 minute we have left, is there anything that comes to your mind?
For that particular question, no, I think you covered all the bases. I do think there's a lot of room for improvement, though. And this was a pretty steady theme at NRF this year, was talking about trying to triage some of these problems with last mile. And I don't think anyone's really come up with an elegant solution, but AI, they keep
let's end
as a potential.
Let's end with that. AI will solve all our problems, and we will all be sipping Mai Tais under an umbrella somewhere warm while the robots do our
That's
job.
it. All hail Skynet.
All hail Skynet. This got dark. It always does. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Really appreciate it. If you have more questions for myself or Heather, please reach out to us on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a pretty easy way to get a hold of me. Does that work for you?
Yeah. Same.
Yep.
H Hershey 1. That's how you find me.
Thank you. Slide into our DMs, and look forward to talking to you again at some other time, Heather. I'm sure that we will encounter each other.
Yes, this was a pleasure, Aaron. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, audience. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.